Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Sorry this one is a little late, some things came up, but we are here and I'm recording this. This is my video going over what happened on Sunday in the Countdown Cup regional knockouts. Let's throw the bracket up so you can see who faced off against each other. In the Apac region it was the Chengdu Hunters taking on the NYXL, and the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Seoul Dynasty, while in the Western region the Toronto Defiant went up against the Paris Eternal. Winner of that series would go on to face the Atlanta Reign. And the San Francisco Shock went up against the Dallas Fuel, with the winner of that series going on to face the LA Gladiators. So let's jump in. And let's start, as always, with the APAC region. The first match was the Chengdu Hunters taking on the NYXL. For the Chengdu Hunters, they were looking to build upon the success they found in the Summer Showdown, finishing in second place. For the NYXL, they are fighting for a spot in the Countdown Cup. If they can get 1 point in the Countdown Cup, they would keep their season hopes alive. They would get a spot in the play-in tournament. But unfortunately for the NYXL, it did not go their way. The Chengdu Hunters were victorious in this series. Not really a surprise, to be honest. The Hunters are a much more consistent team. They've been a stronger team throughout the season so far, and especially recently with the way the meta has developed to be around Wrecking Ball. It's pretty clear that the Hunters should be a favorite team going into the Countdown Cup, with the meta really in their favor. Unfortunate end of the season for the NYXL. They were really starting to kind of heat up at the end of the season, but their differential was just too much to overcome their negative differential. Worse than that of the Hangzhou Spark, so the NYXL. If they had gotten a point back in the June Joust, they would have been in the play-in tournament. But alas, they did not manage to do so, and they are on the outside looking in. It's a good season for them, I think, all things considered. I don't think there were a ton of expectations for them. At least, some people I think were higher on them than they probably should have been, but the NYXL, I think, are a team that they definitely have some potential going forward, and I definitely think that they have the start of a solid team. They just need to make some roster moves, some personnel changes, I think, to really get this team going in the right direction. But we'll have to see what they do next season. But for now, the Chengdu Hunters are the team that will be representing the Eastern region as the #1 seed in the Countdown Cup. Philadelphia Fusion took on the Seoul Dynasty, one of the teams who had just been completely unable to make the monthly tournaments so far this season. Guaranteed to get in. One of them would get in. And this time around, it was the Seoul Dynasty managing to get the victory. Obviously, they had played earlier in the week, they played last week, and it was a victory for the Seoul Dynasty. It was a reverse sweep for them. That was not the case this week. They did not have to take it to a reverse sweep. They won 3-1 over the Fusion, so I'm really high on the Dynasty. I think they are a very good team, and I think this is a really good thing to see them finally finding some success against a good Fusion team. The Fusion have looked a lot better recently, but to me, this is something the Dynasty needed to win. This is the team that really needs to kind of prove that they are among some of these kind of top-level teams. They've been very, very good all season. They've been super consistent. They've just been missing out when it matters most in the tournament matches. So I'm curious to see how they perform in an actual tournament. We haven't seen them yet play in one of these big tournament matches, but I felt like last season when they had the tournament games, they were really, really strong and really, really good. So they still are competing for potentially a shot at the #2 seed in the Eastern region. They would need the Chengdu Hunters to have a pretty rough showing this go-around. Now, they could obviously, it doesn't have to be a rough showing for the Chengdu Hunters. It just needs to be a better showing for the Seoul Dynasty, and I think it has to be a specific level of showing, but I could be wrong. I will double check. As it is now, the Seoul Dynasty are 1 point behind the Chengdu Hunters with a better record. So as long as the Seoul Dynasty do better than Chengdu in this tournament cycle or in the Countdown Cup, they would end up with the higher seed. They would guarantee a playoff spot. So if Seoul wins, they're number 2. If they get the 2 seed and Chengdu gets the 3 seed, they are the 2 seed in the Eastern region. Or if the Dynasty get 3rd and the Hunters get 4th, the Dynasty are the 2 seeds. So a lot to play for the Dynasty. Big tournament for them. Definitely excited to see what happens with them. Philadelphia Fusion not making it to a tournament. I'm not too disappointed in this instance. I think the bigger deal was when they lost to the Valiant and gave the NYXL a chance to get into the tournament. That's the one to me that was really, really bad. This time around, they lost to a team that I think is better than them. They have looked consistently better than them throughout the season, in my opinion, with, I guess, the exception of that 1 point in the May Melee when the Philadelphia Fusion looked incredible. But yeah, I think it is a good showing from the Fusion, making it as far as they did, but ultimately they fell to a team that I think is just better at the end of the day. So in the Eastern region, Chengdu Hunters, Seoul Dynasty, move on. So let's move on over now to the Western region, where the first match was the Toronto Defiant taking on the Paris Eternal. This match went the distance, but it was the Toronto Defiant taking it away. They had played earlier in the week, I think it was. May have been late last week. I think it was earlier in the week. It was almost a reverse sweep for the Paris Eternal. This time around, though, it was a 3-2 win, kind of back and forth game between the Defiant and the Eternal, with the Defiant coming out on top. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with the Defiant. I was pretty low on the Defiant, all things considered. I didn't really think they had a ton of really great-looking things going for them. They were kind of just like a super middle-of-the-pack team, in my opinion. They just kind of looked like they were okay and nothing more than that. But I'm starting to think that it's actually not true. I think the Defiant have actually impressed me a little bit more than I thought they would. And they've started to look a lot more consistent. They've looked a lot stronger. I still think they're not the best team, and I still wouldn't give them much of a kind of chance of doing really, really well in playoffs. But I think that they are a team that are a few pieces away from being really strong. I still think their tank line is not the strongest. I like Sato. I don't think he's had a great season this season. I think he's been kind of average. Michelle has been, once again, pretty average. I think DPS is a bit of an issue for them. I think Aspire is incredibly talented. I think Hisu's incredibly talented, but Neist, I think, leaves some stuff to be desired, and I think that's kind of where their weaknesses are. But when you can get your players in heroes that they're really comfortable on, you know, when you can kind of play that Hanzo and that Tracer, that Hanzo and that Cowboy, Hanzo, Widowmaker type of composition, you look really good with Hisu and Aspire. So those are the types of metas where I feel good about the Defiant. But I just think that they have a decent, they have an okay upside, but a bit too much of a downside to do much kind of long term. But beating the Paris Eternal was a big deal. They beat them twice in the span of a week. So that's a big sign for the Defiant, that they are a team that is getting consistent, that they are able to beat some of the teams around them, and that has kind of proven to me that they're not as weak as I had thought they were. They even looked good up against the Atlanta Reign. It was a better series than I expected it to be, but ultimately it did go the way of the Atlanta Reign. The Atlanta Reign look like the best team in the region right now. They don't have Pelican. He had a collapsed lung, I believe, and had to go to the hospital. So he is not going to be with the team as they go to Hawaii, which could be a really big deal. But we'll see what happens over time. But the Reign still look very good. I still think Edison Kai are perfectly fine. They are perfectly capable of running most of what you need. Pelican is a definite Rookie of the Year frontrunner. Losing him is pretty big, but it's not the end of the world. But I enjoyed this series. I thought it was pretty good. I believe it was a 5-map series that ended in a 3-1. There was a draw in there, so it was not bad. The Atlanta Reign just looked too good. They look to be a very strong team. I'm way more interested in what happens with them, like I said, going forward without Pelican. But credit where credit is due to the Toronto Defiant for pushing the Reign to 5 maps, making it a close series, being able to really challenge a really strong Reign team. I think the Defiant were arguably the weakest team in this Western region knockout. You could probably argue that Paris was weaker than them because Paris didn't look as good when they played the Defiant, so really the weakest team was probably Paris, but Toronto played well. They played above what I had considered them to be. And maybe some of that is the lack of Pelican for the Reign, but I do think the Defiant just are actually a pretty strong team, and I think that they have the potential for some upsets as we get into the play-in tournament, but I wouldn't expect them to be a top-level team by the end of the playoffs. Doesn't seem likely, but with players like Aspire and Hisu just kind of doing the most, I think they really are a very strong team. And Lastro as well. Can't forget about Lastro. So the Atlanta Reign, once again, advance into a tournament. They are the top seed coming out of the Western region. But let's look at the other side of the Western region. First match is the San Francisco Shock taking on the Dallas Fuel. No Pine time, unfortunately. Definitely disappointing. I wanted to see Pine. I thought that we would get to see Pine. I don't really agree with making the decision to make Pine's first match of this season a playoff match. I feel like it would have been better to get her get him some playtime before the playoffs began, but they decided just to go with the tried and true Sparkle and Doha core, and it didn't really do a whole lot, but I think that's just because the Fuel didn't really put the same level of effort into trying to get to Hawaii this time around as the past 3 tournaments, whereas the Shock really wanted to lock up a top 3 spot in the playoffs, guaranteed that they won't have to play in the play-in tournament, and that is what they seemingly care about the most. So it was a 3-0 win for the Shock. Definitely impressed by them. I had predicted them to make this tournament, so them not getting in is not, would have been not like a shock to me, no pun intended, but I think that they looked to be very good, and they looked like the team that would get in. But they move on to play the LA Gladiators. It was a 5-map series between the Gladiators and the Shock. I was feeling really good. I was 3 for 3 on my picks. I had picked the Hunters to get in. I picked the Dynasty to get in. I picked the Reign to get in. And I felt it in my bones. I was going to be 4 for 4. The Shock were going to get in. And then the Gladiators won it in Map 5 and locked up a spot in the Countdown Cup. Finally, once again, just like we had with the Fusion and the Dynasty series, where one of those teams was guaranteed to finally have a tournament appearance. We had the same thing with the Gladiators and the Shock. One of these teams that had been struggling all season to get to a tournament final, or just get to Hawaii, finally was able to make it. This is a big deal. Like I was saying before, the Shock want that top 3 spot in the play-in or in the playoffs. They want to just bypass the play-in tournament entirely, guarantee themselves a spot in the playoffs. And if they had made the Countdown Cup, they would have guaranteed themselves a spot in the playoffs. Wouldn't have had to worry about anything else. They would have been good. Now, they are not guaranteed a spot. The LA Gladiators could pass them. If the Gladiators are able to pick up 2 points or 3 points in the Countdown Cup, they would pass the Shock. The Atlanta Reign also could pass the Shock, but the Reign are already the 3 seed, so if the Reign managed to get 1 point, they would jump the Shock, but that wouldn't push the Shock out of the playoffs and into the play-in tournament. Only the Gladiators can be the team to do that. Though I suppose if the Gladiators were to gain 2 points and the Atlanta Reign were to gain no points, it would actually be the Shock with the 3 seed and the Reign with the 4 seed. So it's very close. It's very exciting. It's very interesting to see what's going on. But good for the Gladiators finally getting stuff together, finally making a tournament appearance. I'm actually very excited for this Countdown Cup. I like all 4 of the teams that made it. I think it'll be a very different tournament from the other ones that we've had. I'm intrigued to see what happens, because we have 2 teams who have been competing in these tournaments with Chengdu and Atlanta that have not found any victories. Neither of them have won one of the tournaments. Then you have the Gladiators and the Dynasty, who are 2 teams that always felt like they should have been in one of these tournaments by now, and they just weren't. For one reason or another. It was, they struggled in certain metas, they struggled just to kind of get over the hump. For the Hunters, it was, or not the Hunters, for the Reign, it was having to get over some of these tournament humps of beating the Fuel and the Dragons. It was really hard, and for Chengdu, it was just the Dragons in the last tournament. And then for the Gladiators, they couldn't get past the Reign. They couldn't get past the Reign again. And then for the Dynasty, it was they couldn't get past Chengdu, and then they couldn't get past the Dragons, and then they couldn't get past Chengdu again. It's just they just always were facing off against a team that I think was just ever so slightly ahead of them in every single one of their appearances. But finally, they managed to get the win that they've been looking for and get that tournament appearance. So I'm super excited for this tournament. I think this is the one I'm most excited for. Unlike the Countdown Cup last year, which I thought was pretty boring, because it was just, the Dragons and the Shock dominating everybody, which we kind of expected from them at that point in the season. This time around, we have teams who haven't won a tournament yet, right? None of them have been victorious in a tournament. They've made tournament finals, or they've made tournaments, or they're a team that has just been on the outside the whole time, just looking in. And we're getting some really great teams. I think it is a very wide open tournament. I think that anybody who says they know exactly this tournament's going to go is wrong, because I think this is going to be the most interesting and most wide open tournament that we've gotten so far this season, and I am very excited for it. So let's just throw up all the finished bracket. This is what the bracket is, in case you didn't see it. So I'll be having my normal video tomorrow where I go over my predictions and let you know what I think is going to happen. But that's all from me for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you want more videos like this in the future, consider liking and subscribing, and comment down below your thoughts on what we saw on Sunday. But that is all from me. I'm going to get out of here. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.